welcome to everybody. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land, the First Pet Nations people, spanning across all the lands we come together on today. I'm coming from Darug land in Western Sydney, and I'd like to recognise the strengths, pride and rich culture within Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities and what that brings to all Australians. And we welcome all who've joined us today. Welcome again, and I'm Cecile Sullivan Elder, the Executive Officer of Family Advocacy. You've joined us today on the Have Your Say NDIS Provider and Worker Registration Taskforce information session. We'll be joined today by the NDIS Provider and Worker Registration Taskforce Chair, Natalie Wade. Natalie holds several senior roles committed to advancing the rights of all Australians with disability, and least of all is a respected disability rights lawyer and advocate. Based in South Australia, Natalie is the founder and principal lawyer director of Equality Lawyers, a disability-led disability rights law firm. Also, we're joined by Linda Hughes, who's a proud parent of Jacob Hughes, who has a disability and is an NDIS participant. Linda takes a make-it-work approach to the NDIS, focused on people living good lives as citizens in our communities. Linda is the president of the Self-Management Hub and also works with us at Family Advocacy in the Resourcing Inclusive Communities Initiative. Now, just a few housekeeping mentions. There's going to be an opportunity to ask questions, and we ask that these are popped in the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. We have Natalie joining us for a short period of time only today, and any question posted that won't be answered by Natalie will be collected and sent to the Secretariat of the Task Force after the event. Any questions with names of participants we will remove prior to sending it to the Task Force. This session is going to be recorded as a means to promote this opportunity out to others, so who might be interested and weren't able to attend today. Nobody online can be viewed, including the question asked for this recording. And any technical assistance, we've got very capable Kelly and Clara behind the scenes from the con team. So pop something into chat and both of them will try to assist you. We've also got Mark, our Auslan interpreter, who will be joining us today. There's also closed captions available, which can be found on the bottom by clicking CC. At the bottom of the screen, there should be a little bar there, or a little CC piece there. Okay, so due to the amount of people online today, we've had to change this to a webinar format, so the visibility and access to other participants can't happen in that format. Good thing that we've got so many here, but there's a workaround that we had to do with that. And just as a follow-up, participants will be provided with the recording, as well as a document that we've designed that hopefully will help craft some of the input that you want to provide to the task force. And we'll be basically sending that and other information, bits and pieces following this session today. It's a short session. Basically, we wanted to get something out as this closes on the 28th of April, and we really wanted to encourage people to feed in as much as possible. Okay, so that's the housekeeping. Now a bit of context. The NDIS Provider and Worker Registration Task Force has been established to provide advice on the design and implementation of a new graduated risk proportionate regulatory model that was proposed in the NDIS Review Final Report, Recommendation 17.1. Some key features of the recommendations and in the scope of the task force are that it is to be developed in consultation with people with disabilities, their families, providers and regulators. Consideration of a mandatory registration or enrolment of all providers with requirements that are proportionate to the risk of activities and supports and operations, and to provide a means to have full visibility across supports and payments within the scheme. The current proposed model being considered has 4 components: advanced registration for the highest risk supports, general registration for the medium risk supports, basic registration for the lowest risk supports, and enrolment again for the lowest risk supports. Many online may want to take a deeper dive into the aspects of what this may mean for you. And again, we'll provide some information and links on this in the follow-up email. We will also be putting together an organisational submission to the Taskforce and hope to work with the Taskforce to organise a focus group for families in the role of nominees. Many people online today are most concerned with impacts considered around self-management, utilising plan managers, and if it's the case, their role as nominee. The disability community that surrounds family advocacy is strongly focused on these support arrangements, as they often have provided the most impactful means for a person with disability to be genuinely connected to their community. And as most of us know, this requires a high level of choice and control over funded supports to achieve this well. On the other side of this, many people have chosen the self-management route as registered providers with high levels of regulation and registration currently have failed to meet the genuine needs of the person with disability. Not all, of course, but many, as both the DRC and the NDIS review recommendations have highlighted. Family Advocacy's vision around the reform is that a balance is struck with a deep understanding of this. The Taskforce in this regard needs to hear from people about the many innovative arrangements occurring across Australia and how these arrangements provide safeguards and, importantly, good outcomes. Now I have the privilege of handing over to the Taskforce Chair for her presentation, Natalie Wade.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with Family Advocacy and your members. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the lands on which I'm coming to you from, which is the lands of the Kaurna people, and pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. I'd also like to acknowledge any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people that are here with us today. I've been invited to speak to you about the work of the Taskforce and ways in which you can become involved in our work. But before I speak about that, I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge the profound impact that the recommendation of the NDIS review may have had on you and your family. I recognise that this has caused significant distress and concern across the disability community, where it has felt that a change to registration requirements could mean an end to current arrangements that are innovative and have also been developed over a number of years. The Honourable Minister Bill Shorten has sought advice from the Taskforce, perhaps for this very reason, because there is concern that a change to registration and enrolment would mean impact on existing arrangements. And whilst it is clear that the current system is not working for a lot of people and a lot of people who deserve the system to work for them, it is also clear in our terms of reference, which reflect what the Minister wishes to hear about, is that arrangements such as services for one, direct employment, and individualised approaches to support are important and valued by the NDIS, and that they would continue under a registration and enrolment model, whatever that may look like. But I also acknowledge that it's hard to conceptualise what a registration and enrolment model might look like, or how that might work for you and your family member, given that the current registration approach is based on a one-size-fits-all model, which is voluntary. And what is being proposed by the NDIS review is quite a bit different. So I really wanted to just acknowledge the distress and anxiety that has been caused and has been shared with the Taskforce to date. I really hope that the Taskforce is able to work with people in the disability community to ensure that our advice reflects and is considerate of those bespoke individual arrangements, which are really important. As Cecile said in the opening, registered provider offerings have not always worked for people with disability and their families. And that's important to acknowledge, that in the absence of services and supports, that people with disability in their families have come up with innovative and unique, but also really well thought out solutions to, in some scenarios, very complex support needs. And so already the task force has been speaking quite a bit to parents and people with disabilities who have services for one and who use direct employment to manage their supports and have done so for a really long time. And others are new, others are slightly more new to it, and they're still feeling their way through. But what we have really appreciated hearing is the composition of those arrangements, how they work, what is good about them, where you see improvements to them to be. And if there was a registration and enrollment model, what would that serve for you? So we've been really exploring with families and participants, is there any benefit to you? Now, I appreciate that the current one-size-fits-all model to registration is unlikely to serve any benefit to your current arrangements. But if we put that to one side for a moment, and we think about how registration and enrollment might work as a regulatory approach, what might that look like? And is there any benefit to you? And if there's not, that's okay. We're keen to hear that as well. But I did want to just draw your attention to that area of focus for us. And I'm sure you are already aware. But in terms of reference, I'm just going to look at another screen because, as much as I wish I could say that I haven't quite memorized the precise wording perfectly yet, but ask me again in June and I bet you I will have. The terms of reference specifically mention services for one, specifically mentions direct employment, and also specifically says, this is the part I'm going to read, that we provide advice on the design and implementation of the recommended model as it relates to upholding the rights of people with disability to exercise choice and control. So we specifically have to address that. But the task force is really committed to delivering the minister with an evidence-based advice. So we need to generate an evidence base. And the way we're going to get an evidence base is from hearing from all of you. Whilst the task force might have views about regulation and human rights and everything in between, it's not really about our theoretical understanding of things. It's not really about overly intellectualizing the issue. It actually needs to be really based on lived experience, and it needs to be led by people who are actually living this day in, day out. Now, it's impossible to have a task force made up of every Australian, which is fair enough, but it is not impossible to hear from a lot of Australians who have this experience. I think even though change and the reforms that have been put forward are really scary and it's hard to see how this will all fit together, I think from the task force perspective, this is a real opportunity to modernise the regulation of supports and services for Australia. I don't know that we've ever really paused for a moment to think about how we do that. And I'm really excited at the opportunity to have that conversation and also to let the minister know, which I'm sure he does know a lot about, well, he knew a lot about it to put it in our terms of reference, but I'm excited to let him know about what people do get up to, like how they do craft their supports, like from the ones that we've spoken to and the ones that I knew about already, having, you know, been a disability rights lawyer and advocate for a long time, they're pretty cool arrangements. Like they're really thought out, you know, and they're not these unregulated, unregistered, strange, curious, rogue beasts. They are, you know, really genuine, top shelf arrangements where people and families have wanted to be kept safe and also have wanted to pursue really great lives, is my understanding. But you can all tell me if that is absolutely not the way of it, or if you have a different experience. So how to talk to us and how to talk to you. So you can write a submission. I really hope you do, but I know that writing submissions can be a bit of a drag. And so they're due on the 28th of April, if that's your thing. If that's not your thing, then there's other ways to go about it. You can request to meet with us, which is, as it says, like you write an email and say, I want to meet with a task force member, and the task force member will be made available to you. So that might be good, excuse me. You can also provide a verbal submission, and that will be scribed. So if you don't want to write it, you don't have to. I think most excitingly, we're hosting roundtables. Excuse me. I've been talking all morning, it seems. So we are holding roundtables. They are both in webinar, they're mostly webinars, most of them are. There are a couple in person, but anyway, they're webinars, and you can come to as many or as little as you like. There are 30, I think, at the moment that are up on the website. And there are ones around issues affecting families with complex support needs. There's one next week on choice and control. There is also one next week on direct employment and microboards. So I know it's short notice, but if you can get there, we'd really appreciate it. They're group discussions that are designed to be interactive. And we're just really hoping to hear from people in whatever way they find safe for them to engage. And hoping that through using these different ways of engagement that people will be able to bring to us their ideas, stories and solutions. So really looking forward to all of your input, but really wanted to highlight that what you are all doing, as I understand it from Cecile and team, is absolutely within our terms of reference and is a very clear point of focus for the task force going forward. So I might stop there before I have a talking fit, and also to hand over for some questions if you have them.
Yeah, no, thanks very much for that, Natalie. There's a few questions certainly coming through. I might start with one around which may or may not fall into your scope, the NDIS legislation, giving powers to the Minister CEO to develop rules for a class of participant. And has the task force considered the potential human rights implications around that, and the different registration requirements based on class of people? For example, saying people with intellectual disability cannot self-manage home and living supports. That's the wrap up of that question. So the interaction, or is there any interaction between the new legislation or proposed legislation and the task force that you're currently chairing?
Yeah, sure. So the new legislation is an important part of the government's response to the NDIS review, but the task force is not inquiring specifically into that. and we are mindful of it and we're aware of it, but we are firmly focused on ensuring that we advise the Minister on a regulatory model that fits with the modern lives of people with disabilities and their families. So it's
Yep, okay.
not directly my purview of responsibility.
Yep, okay, thanks, Natalie. There's one here, a little bit of a statement or to help projecting what you, the advice hasn't been informed at, but the registration and enrolment process when considering things like sole traders and ABNs and puts it potentially at a disadvantage to the big service providers. So any thoughts on that?
Well, will it? Will it and does it? That's the question to be answered, right? So definitely do not assume, in fact, it would be incorrect to think that the current registration process would be what the future state would look like. So I think the point that the audience member might be alluding to is that sole traders and those using ABNs have distinct requirements around what they might be able to do if they were required to register or enroll, depending on the services that they provide. And I think that is something we really need to hear about. So we need to hear about what are some of the abilities and also restrictions on sole traders and ABN users to engage in the proposed model. But certainly I wouldn't jump to overlaying what currently happens as that.
Okay. Thanks for this. I'll try and paraphrase this one. It's quite a long one. Support. A couple of our support individual providers are not registered, but they are the most relevant and important to their son. It's very difficult to find the right support, and if registration is required, we may lose that choice and control with the best support provider, like the person's son currently has. And that whole tension between a lot of current registered providers being quite rigid with many ways in which they provide support, and just how the mandatory registration is a real concern. And just, I suppose, to turn it into a question, what would be helpful for the task force to hear around that?
Yeah, thank you. So that's exactly the type of situation we want to hear about, and we would like to hear about, in that example, why would or what would some of the barriers be to those really great support workers being in a registered or enrolment model? And if you have a look at the recommendation, there's a figure that figure 14 that goes through what the proposed model is, and so what the requirements would be. And so really keen to hear about why that wouldn't work, and yeah, why maybe not why, but what would be the impact on having those requirements put forward for those workers.
Yeah. Okay, thanks for that. The role of the quality and safeguard and how it plays to regulate registered providers is currently the question talks about the failure to properly investigate and address issues of service delivery with quite heavy levels of registration and regulation already, and no fines. And any early thinking around that from the task force, Natalie, or what would be helpful against the task force to hear about informing some advice?
Yeah, we'd really like to hear about what powers you think a Quality and Safeguards Commission or a regulator should have to create quality or to create safety something that I have been asking people that have their own arrangements is, what do you do when things go wrong? What are your plans? And I've been really looking for again, like often when you ask those questions, great ideas and great solutions come forward, and really exploring with people who have lived experience of this. So what would you want a regulator to do? Like the NDIS review has found that the current regulatory framework is no good. So what would you like to happen if there was a regulator? Like, would you want them to be able to ban someone like they can now? Would you like them to be able to fine someone? Would you like them to be able to put someone in jail? Like, what's your sort of best version of that as it relates to your current situation and setup?
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Okay, would it be possible to consider for the proportionate part to look at the registration enrolment cost time on a cost per participant ratio, so as not to create a market advantage to large providers over small providers, including obviously services or arrangements for one?
If I've understood your question properly, it's about the cost, right? Is that right?
It's about I suppose, the proportionate nature of the regulation, and so which is the cost and time, and basically not to create a market disadvantage really for small providers, and an advantage for large providers.
Yeah. So what is interesting is the proposed model talks about proportionality with respect to risk, sort of high, medium, and low risk support services. It does not talk about proportionality with respect to size of organization or location or this or that. And it's something that with our terms of reference, which highlights the different arrangements, so services provided, direct employment, platform providers, or traditional services, and anything in between. We are exploring quite a lot of detail around, well, you know, if you apply the proposed model, what impact does the size of the organization have on that application of the model? Like something that we heard recently from families who run services for one was around, you know, the regulatory burden of having to have procedures and policies, like filling bookshelves of these types of manuals and documentation, and you know, how do we ensure that that links to quality of service delivery, but also really centrally links to outcomes, because the advice that we're providing must include that piece about upholding the rights of people with disabilities, which is really, really central to all of this. So if you do have views and solutions around the impacts on different sides of the organisation, might be about cost, it might be about administrative burden or whatnot, then please do let us know, because we need to have the evidence to be able to provide the advice where possible.
Yeah, and I've got a really important question here around concerns that some people have around making a submission and that having an impact on their current NDIS plan, and can this be done anonymously?
Oh, that's a really great question. Yes, you can make a submission anonymously. You can submit the submission via the web form without putting your name. I've certainly seen anonymous submissions come through, so that obviously works. I hope it's working. It should be working. I believe it is. But also, it's really important to note, and I know this is sometimes a little tricky just to be told, but what you tell the task force won't go any further. Like, I'm not going to take your submission and go and put it on Minister Shorten's desk and be like, see, this Linda Hughes and her case, I'm telling you, it really is going to come to myself and Vicky O'Halloran and Michael Borowick, who joined me in the task force. We will see it. Some members of our secretariat will see it, but it won't go further. But I acknowledge that is tricky, whatever the case. So you do what is comfortable for you. But in my opinion, there's no risk to your current plan arrangements if you provide feedback to the task force.
Okay, thank you. We've got one, Natalie, that's come up actually quite a bit since the task force was announced, and that's around individualised living arrangement. And somebody that's expressing that they're in the stages of thinking through supporting their son to move into a home of his own with two flatmates, carefully chosen, reduced rent in lieu of agreed minimal home assistance, such as cooking, mealtime together, etc. We're trying to create an ordinary setup. Currently can do that under the arrangements within the NDIS, and as a nominee for our son, we're concerned that it's likely to fit into a higher category of support and require mandatory training, auditing, etc. And just the concern around how this may impact and take something that's quite ordinary and natural and turn it into a weird registration process, and just your thoughts on that.
The registration process. Oh dear, that's that's an official term. A weird registration.
Well, weirdness, the registration process even has to occur, which in a lot of those arrangements, people are trying to do things as naturally as possible.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point. I think that people should share with us examples of both organic lifestyles, if I can call it that, but also natural safeguards. So really thinking about, how the proposed model would impact on, as your audience member has said, the development of that organic arrangement, or also impacting on natural safeguards. And really, there's no right or wrong answer. I just would encourage you to also, wherever possible, provide some solutions to that.
Yeah, wonderful. Now, I'm mindful of time, and I think we're about 10 minutes over. So, and thanks very much, Natalie, for staying on to answer some of these questions. And just as mentioned at the beginning, any of the questions or all of the questions will be forwarded to the task force post the webinar, and any kind of names taken out of that. So thank you again, Natalie. Really appreciate your time talking through some of that. And now I'm introducing Linda Hughes to talk through some of the arrangements that her son Jacob has as an NDIS participant. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Cecile. Is my screen sharing? I hope it is. I'm just it's really lovely to hear some of the things that you're saying, Natalie, because it really reflects some of the thinking we've done. And this is actually, I'm going to talk a little bit about the composition of Jacob's support and the outcomes and the benefits, I suppose, that come with that. So I'm in Newcastle on Awabakal and Warramai lands, and Newcastle is the launch site of the NDIS. So we've had the benefit of the NDIS for 10 years. When the NDIS launched, I decided to directly employ Jacob's support workers. And I did that because I could see that taking on the responsibility, the additional responsibility and the legal responsibilities that go with being an employer, such as withholding tax and etc., I realized that I could personalize Jacob's support in a way that couldn't happen with service providers as they stood in Newcastle at the time, and probably to a large degree continue to. And I'd realized I could delegate more responsibilities. By taking on responsibility, I could delegate some of those responsibilities and not have to do everything myself, and let the NDIS stretch the NDIS funding further and get bang for buck. So I'll just talk about Jacob's arrangement, but before I do that, I will talk about Jacob. So Jacob's a 31-year-old man, and he lives in his own home, which he shares with a housemate. So that question around housemates is really key to us as well. Jake's a good friend and party host, and is a beer maker and a sports fan, and has lots of valued roles in the community. He's a guy who's needs quite a bit of support throughout the day and the night. So this is kind of how we do things. Jacob has an NDIS plan. Because of the complexities of the NDIS, I'm Jacob's plan nominee. And although he's in control of his supports and how he lives his life, I take care of the back end stuff. So that's me. And because I like to delegate tasks that I'm not fond of, I suppose, we've engaged a bookkeeper to help me with payroll and the super and the tax and some of the administration and bookkeeping that comes with running directly employing a team of support workers. But the other thing that the other piece to this as well is that we have engaged a lifestyle coordinator. And in some ways, that's me handing over some of the baton, handing over some of the responsibilities that I had with making sure Jake's life stayed on track. So Jake's support coordinator has a range of roles. He's a key contact. He does the rosters, he fills in, and really kind of supports Jake with decision making, and ensures that the team are doing good practice, and supports them with training and etc. And that means that the team can get on with supporting Jake to live well at home and in the community. So that's a real snapshot of how we do it. But there's also the other part to Jacob's living arrangement, where he has a housemate that he shares and his home with. His housemate provides some practical support around the home in terms of home maintenance and yard maintenance and companionship. They share their lives as well. So they very much enjoy social times together. And Jacob has a circle of support that's made up of what we call the nearest and dearest, and they help Jacob with decision-making, thinking and planning, and putting his plans into action. So the circle are really also really important around the future planning for Jacob for when I'm not around, for when I drop dead, to put it really bluntly. So that's Jake's arrangement. So I think that sort of can give some context about, like, if you're putting a submission into to the task force, that you've sort of nut out what your arrangement is. There's a lot of benefits, and I've listed all the benefits here, and I'm so aware that we're over time that I'll just I'll let them sit here and they can be in the video. But there's lots of really good things that we have achieved, or Jacob has achieved. And I'm just going to say one of them is that he has many valued roles and he's loved and known by many people. And the other benefits, there's like 2 pages of benefits. Bang for buck. That we're able to provide the specific training for Jacob's support needs. And I don't think that the NDIS currently 6 hours of shadow shifts would even cut the sides in Jacob's complex support needs, and a loyal and stable support team. So I think when you're writing to the task force, again, just really, spell out the benefits that you're achieving or your family member is achieving through the arrangement that you have, and perhaps some of the things that aren't working as well, and where you might like to see some changes. Again, safeguards. Nat, you talked about natural safeguards, and that's where we really focus, because we believe people keep people safe. And we really focus on Jacob building relationships and sustaining relationships, not just because it's life enriching, which it is, but because of the safeguarding aspects that come with it. Being involved in the community and having that positive identity, but also having lots of people looking out for him. We've got some pretty, after 10 years of recruiting support workers, we've got some pretty good ways of trying to work out who is a good match with the team, and particularly in terms of values. We've got a questionnaire that they fill in, that support workers fill in, and gee, it's quick at working out who's going to work with with Jacob well and who's not. And we don't look for people with training already. It's okay if they do, but often we find that comes with a whole bunch of assumptions and prejudices that we have to undo. So what we're trying to do is have a really direct influence on Jacob's team culture and the practice. And we have really detailed procedures and documentations that are easy to use so that's another safeguard. We really talk about valuing integrity in the team. And that's because, amongst other things, we need people to own up for the mistakes. And I think that's something that we're able to, in the culture of the team, we're able to be cultivating. We're able to solve problems quickly. And as I said, Jacob's support workers, they're directly employed by me, so they're not registered. We certainly do a very thorough vetting, reference checks. We don't use the worker screening because it asks for a driver's license or a passport, and I have neither, so I cannot access it. So we use police checks and the Working with Children check in New South Wales as a proxy for working with vulnerable people. So we do all of those types of things that are really important in safeguards as well. So if you're writing to the task force, I'd suggest that you really think about what do you do to keep your family member or yourself safe when you're engaging with supports. And we listen to Jake. I think that's a really important thing. We sort of really kind of go, how's Jake tracking, and is he telling us things are going well or not? So just what happens next, the task force need to hear from you about whether, what you think about the regulation and what level of regulation would work. Tell the task force how you arrange your supports or your family members' supports, the outcomes, the benefits, and the safeguarding measures that you already have in place, and perhaps some ideas or solutions that you might have for the task force as well.
Oh, thank you, Linda. That was fantastic. Really good to hear how you're stepping through some of the considerations to give Jacob his voice to the task force. Look, I want to thank everybody that was here today. First and foremost, Natalie Wade and Linda Hughes for sharing their insights today, and Natalie, from your perspective, how and what is important for the task force to hear so they can work towards trying to get this balance right. Family Advocacy will send up a follow-up email and with some resources and information attached in this really short period of time. 28th of April, as we've suggested, is the deadline for that. We'll also be able to offer some advice and support if possible, if people are thinking through how would you best present that information in the most simple and solution-based orientated way. So I want to thank everybody online today for taking the time to listen to the presentation, and really hope that it was of some assistance to get your thinking around what this was, but also what steps that you can take to ensure that the task force hears from as many people and their families, particularly around those arrangements that are unique and very individualised. So thank you, and have a good rest of the day.